Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cabinet meeting of East Renfrewshire Council on Thursday, 27th of April. First item on the agenda is apologies. Everyone is here. Second item, any declarations of interest? Nope. So moving on to the third item on the agenda, which is the Equality and Human Rights Mainstreaming Progress Report for 2023. Jamie's taking us through this. Thanks, Jamie.
Good morning. So the paper in front of members is our statutory progress report on the fulfilling of our equalities duties. Under the Equalities Act 2010 and the Scottish specific equalities duties, which came into force in 2012, Council has an obligation to publish an equalities plan every 4 years and a progress report in the mid 2 year period of the plan. So the report before members sets out how we are fulfilling those duties. It's also worth pointing out, though, that those we've been endeavouring to fulfil those duties during one of the most disruptive and challenging periods in recent years as a result of the pandemic, where a lot of community activity, access to services was disrupted, and vulnerable residents were actually unable to, in often instances, access support services and peers. So the report sets out, despite those challenges, the significant work that's been done across the organisation with partners and with the community to fulfil our equalities duties and meet our equalities outcomes. So just as part of our main duty is on mainstream equalities, and again the report highlights the new equality, fairness and rights assessments that have been introduced, new systems for complaints monitoring, and increased number and diversity of citizens panel members, as well in line with our duties to increased representation. We've also have equality outcomes, which we've been making progress towards, including improving representation of minority ethnic residents in public life, including also looking at disabled and younger residents' ability to access services and feel connected, domestic abuse survivors, mental health and wellbeing, including LGBT+, diversity of our workforce, and our younger and disabled residents able to participate and support good and quality employment opportunities. So the report sets out a range of progress against those criteria, and it also highlights how the Council as an employer has performed as well, including introducing a range of policies and supports for our staff, including a pregnancy loss charter, a new menopause policy, the health and wellbeing strategy, and also developing a new staff equality, diversity inclusion network as well. And also note that the progress that's been made in reducing the gender pay gap. So the report as it stands is substantial. It covers a very challenging period. At no point are we saying there isn't significantly more work to do, and indeed we recognise that some of the challenges we have faced have made that work more challenging and in some cases more difficult over the longer term. But we remain committed to going on that journey, and I think that the report highlights that commitment. So members are asked to note the progress and agree excuse me, sorry. Let's get that up on my screen. So members are just being asked to note the duties that relate to the Equality Act 2010 and the specific Scottish regulations for 2012, and approve the content of the report that's before you this morning.
Thanks very much, Jamie. And it is, as you say, a very comprehensive report and covers a difficult period of recovery for the Council in this area. Councillor Anderson, I thought you were wanting to come in. Right. Councillor Pagnell.
Thank you. As the report highlights, East Renfrewshire is one of the most ethnically diverse communities in Scotland. I was wondering what the Council were doing to attract employment from the BAME community and also the disabled community. As a disabled member myself, I know how complicated getting into work can be, and that there isn't necessarily always the support that's required. So what are we doing to attract the BAME community to become employees of East Renfrewshire and the disabled community? Thank you.
Councillor Pragnall, I'll just answer that question. So we've actually been working quite closely with the Scottish Government, and we've signed up to the Scottish Government's Equality Charter, which is about the employment and skills and race equality. So we have committed to take on board the recommendations they've made in their EHIC report. And we have a number of those recommendations in the report that we provided. So we have included that inclusivity statement in all our recruitment adverts that go out. We've also we met with the communities and we've spoken to them, and we've created some, on the back of that, we've created some posters, which has been really good, and we've got those out to the community as well. One thing that we have been doing now is making sure that on our jobs we try to ask the managers to think about the wording, think about terminology. I had an organisation contact me, a dyslexia organisation, said, should you really be saying things like excellent communication skills? So it's elements like that. So we're really taking into account now, not just using the standard job descriptions, for example, or adverts, really thinking and taking the time to think about inclusivity.
Can I also just maybe add as well that the establishment of the staff equality network is a key component to our response as well, because we're asking our own staff what their experience has been, just in terms of coming into the council and what it's like to be employed. As I did mention, also a lot of community activity was disrupted during the pandemic. That's starting to come back now, so we are actively trying to build dialogue with those communities, whether it's around disability, neurodiversity, or ethnic or cultural backgrounds, and talking to those communities as well. And part of us being an employer is just one part of those conversations.
Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks to you both. It is an excellent report, and it's great to see that there's a lot of good work getting done. And in relation to what Councillor Pragnall was talking about there, I appreciate the efforts that we're making, and we can be ready, and we can actually try to encourage people as much as possible so that we have the policies in place to make sure that the diversity and equality is treated properly. One thing I would ask is that obviously this is it's a 4-year cycle with a 2-year maintenance. So, but obviously we're not. Am I correct in saying or assuming that we'll see the keywords progress, and to actually see maybe in 6 months' time or a year, will we look at this again with the 6 outcomes, and just to get an update, that to get encouragement that things are going in the right direction? Can we ask for that, or would it happen as part of the cycle?
So we do annual reporting as part of our normal performance cycle. This is a 2-year statutory report as part of our duties that we have an obligation to produce. So we do have established performance monitoring arrangements that cover annually, that would cover most of the components that are within this plan, and also we'll be beginning to develop the longer 4-year plan as well. So there'll be an opportunity for members to understand the progress we're making and also help shape the future direction of that as well.
Yeah, that's the key thing, is for us to see the progress. So that'll come to Cabinet again, I take it, another update?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Devlin, are you okay? Are you content? I've got a number of points, if you could bear with me. I think this is a very, very helpful report, very comprehensive. I think it is important with this agenda that the Council leads by example. I think we would all agree with that. It'd be helpful at some point to know what our targets are in terms of our ethnic diversity and disability compared to the population as a whole. That should really be our benchmark. And I know there seems to be issues in terms of getting that data right now in terms of what the broader population is. And I do accept there's issues with our underlying HR data in terms of completeness of responses in terms of protected characteristics. And I know that's a challenge with GDPR and all that sort of stuff. But I think it is very important that we show leadership from the Council for the broader community to show good progress on that. So I'd be interested in seeing those targets, where we need to get to compared to the population, so that we're actually making sort of meaningful progress. And I do note that we have made some progress, but it's on a relatively small base and relatively small numbers. But it's difficult to see how far we have to go without that sort of broader population context, which I understand is coming from the census data, which we get later this year. So perhaps first response on that, Jamie, if that's okay.
I'll just respond on that point about targets. I would just advise against having targets per se, just because the connotations in terms of the processes around that. If we have targets, we might potentially be using positive discrimination, which means we might be giving somebody a post based on the fact of their protected characteristics rather than the best person for the job. But what I do think we should have is ambition and ambitious, not targets so much, but I agree we should be actually looking at the census data. I think we should be benchmarking ourselves against other councils like Glasgow City Council, because our diversity percentage is relatively the same percentage, but they're obviously a large council, and so I do think we should be benchmarking ourselves with other councils and having that discussion.
That's very helpful, and I think that's probably a better way of positioning it as benchmarking, both against our own population and with other council areas as well, rather than specific targets. I do get the point on positive discrimination, so that's very helpful. When do you think we'll be in a position of having benchmarking? Will that be in a year's time, or earlier? Or?
Sorry, so I'll come in. Basically, at the moment, we're hoping that early census data will become available this year. However, it's not all released at one time, and obviously you'll be aware there were some complications with the census and the extent to which the sample sizes. What happens is you get Scotland level data, and then it starts to trickle down to smaller geographies over time. We're expecting the Scotland level data to be, in a normal cycle, we would expect that to be released this summer based on when the census took place. However, it remains to be seen that we're definitely going to get that there. It's not within our control. So we're very keen for it, keen to have it and keen to get the local level data out of it. But it will be a function of what happens nationally in terms of when that becomes available.
Okay, so perhaps this time next year we might be in a better position, or even then that might be a bit.
We may be,
maybe.
But again, it's not in our control.
But it's definitely an ambition to include.
Absolutely, and I think, as Kath has said, we can set our ambition, and we can work hard to encourage more diversity in our staff and understand how we can make it easier for people of different backgrounds or with different circumstances to be able to apply and into the council and thrive when they're here.
Thanks, Jamie. Now I've got a number of sort of very specific questions, if you don't mind. Page 28, we talk about establishing.
2 seconds.
Yep.
Leona, have we got a technical issue? Is this now?
Everyone that's participating in the meeting is still, the recording's still happening. It's the Teams issue, but I don't think Margaret's looking for information and Kathy's item's not come up yet, so I'll get it before you.
Okay.
Can we carry on, Leona?
Yes.
Okay. Jamie, so page 28 talks about establishing a community quality forum. Who do we expect to chair that, or is that still work in progress?
That's still work in progress at the moment. It has been led by our strategic services team. We're working with different representative groups, and we're trying to expand that as much as we can. We want that to be as open and inclusive as possible. There will be a discussion at some point about the role of the community and whether that will be led by the council or whether there is a leadership model or whatever. But that work still needs to play through.
Thanks for that. Next on page 29, we don't have data on the community council membership. Is that something that we're aiming to collect in due course?
On that specific one, I'd need to come back to you. I'm not sure where we're going specifically on community council data, but I can check that and come back.
Thanks. And Jamie, in the table on 33, sorry, this is going on a bit, but I think they're quite important points. one of the critical indicators, percentage of minority ethnic residents who feel a sense of belonging, has gone down. Any indication what's driving that?
So that's come through our citizens panel. So the one thing I would say about that one is the sample size on that might be quite small and subject to variability. We have worked hard and increased the sample size of that group, so that in itself we may have done a better job of getting more people, but that then has made quite a small number, a more numerically volatile measure, and move a bit more than we would like. So again, yeah, that is part of what we will discuss with community networks and get underneath. So again, we use the citizens panel as a bit of a can opener to give us some numerical information, and then we engage with local communities about what's sitting underneath that. So that's what we'll be doing there.
Thanks, Jimmy. Next one, page 36, domestic abuse incidents. There's a whole number of stats here. Seems to be a little bit of a confusing picture as to what is going on. The headline number of domestic abuse incidents has gone up, 537 to 593. So percentage-wise, pretty significant over that sort of period. But then there's some positive data underneath that as well. Particularly when you look at the number of referrals to domestic abuse has actually dropped, 842 compared to 945. So it feels a little bit of a confusing picture as to, is it worsening, is it getting better? I don't know if you could give some colour on that.
Domestic abuse, our colleagues in the HSCP aren't here today, but we can get a further briefing on that. I think what we are clear about is that we did see an increased number of domestic abuse incidents during the period of the pandemic, and that still is an area of pressure for the services. I think what we have got better at is training staff and raising awareness, and there are a range of multi-agency approaches to that are ongoing, and some really good multi-agency working in that area. I know we're also in dialogue with our colleagues about putting some additional resource into domestic abuse, using some of the COVID reserves we have, for example, trying to make sure that we've got the right support in place and that we're addressing the issues from the pandemic. So I can't give you detailed information about all the statistics in here, but there's a lot of work ongoing in that space, and I think Lorraine wants to come in.
Yes, thank you. It's an area of particular interest when I work with HSCP, and have been involved in this area for many years and talked to the team about it. There's two different issues to be taken into account in domestic abuse. First of all, as women in particular, although some men affected by it as well, but particularly women, we have been working over many years as a council with our partners in the police to encourage an increase in reporting. So the first thing you actually want is the numbers to go up. That's a good thing, because there's a huge amount of under-reporting because women are scared to come forward, don't think they'll be taken seriously. So working with the police, we are keen to actually increase the numbers so we get a proper number of people coming forward. You would then expect, once that number goes up, that you can then work to take preventative action in terms of domestic violence. And there are a number of really interesting projects done in the west of Scotland about how you do that, and treating the family as a whole, and also working with the perpetrator as well as to discourage them, rather than always different ways to deal with perpetrators of domestic violence. So the HSCP do a huge amount of work, and I would say more than likely close to the forefront in Scotland in terms of that work that they're doing, and also working very closely with the police. The second part is in terms of COVID. The numbers you're referring to of incidents go from 537, that was during the year of COVID. So during that year, our biggest fear was that particularly women were trapped in houses and couldn't escape, they couldn't go, they weren't having time on their own to report domestic abuse, and they weren't of the time or ability because of lockdown to actually move out. And that was one of our risk factors during COVID that we were concerned about. So I would have I'm actually pleased that the numbers gone up in that sense, because I believe it reflects not increased amount of domestic abuse, but women coming forward in particular being prepared to go to the police or to the HSCP or Women's Refuge or all the different organisations that support women. So I'm not, I would expect more reporting of domestic abuse as people feel happier or more confident that the authorities will take it seriously and will be able to, and we've got to make sure there's a support mechanisms in place to support people suffering from it. So it's a really complex area. There's a team in HSCP who are absolute experts in this area. So I know you're already on the board of the IGB, so I presume there'll be presentations at the IGB on that, and they can get into a lot more detail than we're able to today.
Very helpful. Thanks very much for the response there. Clearly, we've identified that domestic abuse as a key hangover from COVID and implication of COVID, and something that we're addressing in our COVID reserve utilisation. So that's all very helpful. One final really minor point, and it's on page 39, and one of the critical indicators, and it's on the LGBT plus helpline. Very low utilisation of this. You know, is this the best way to reach out to that community?
So the background to that was that was identified, developed and ran by young volunteers within the authority. So it wasn't an authority-led initiative, although we were reporting on it and supported it. It was local young LGBT young people themselves that felt there was a need for it. However, when they ran it, when they set it up and ran it, although it was promoted, they didn't get the uptake that they had maybe hoped for. So that was, again, I would say there's a wee bit of nuance there to that particular initiative. I think it was a positive attempt by that particular community, the young people in that particular community, to try and help each other, but it didn't quite have the traction that they hoped it would.
Very helpful, thanks, Jimmy, and thanks for taking all of the sort of detailed questions. Appreciate that. Is there any other questions? So can we go to the recommendations in this report, if I can get to the right page. It's a very long report, so I'm scrolling back up to find the recommendation page. Have you got it? Right. So if I can ask Cabinet to note the duties of the Quality Act 2010 and approve the content of the Quality and Human Rights Mainstreaming Progress Report prior to publication. Are we all content with that? Thank you very much, Jamie. Very comprehensive report. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 4, Draft Food Growing Strategy, and I can ask Gillian to talk to this report. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to publish and consult on this Draft Food Growing Strategy. Section 112 of the Community Empowerment Act requires the Council to take reasonable steps to provide sufficient allotments to keep the waiting list at no more than half the current number of allotments. So at the moment we have 79 allotment plots and the waiting list is 65. So we are breaching that requirement at the moment. The key requirement for the food growing strategy prepared under the Community Empowerment Act is that we should identify land that could be used for allotment sites, identify land that can be used by the community to grow vegetables, fruits, herbs and flowers, and describe how the authority intends to increase the provision of allotments or other land for community growing. The list of sites being considered for the delivery of the food growing sites is detailed in Appendix 1 of the report. And at paragraph 11, there is the list of the community organisations, and there's quite a sizable number of them within East Renfrewshire, shows the organisations that currently grow food and will be our partners moving forward. Thank you.
Gillian, thank you very much. Councillor Devlin.
Actually, just a question in that your food growing strategy. You mentioned the groups that are going to be involved in it. If you look at Auchenback, the Harry Burns Centre in Auchenback, it's been a piece of ground, terrible piece of ground beside it since the site the centre was built. And Auchenback Active have always looked to that site to build a community garden. Potentially we could grow fruit, vegetables, blah blah blah. That's been going on for 5 or 6 years and nothing's ever come out of it. And I notice it's not on the list.
Do you know if it's council-owned land?
It's council-owned land.
It is? Okay.
It's a big piece of ground. It's used for flag sitting now.
Okay. Can I take that away, Councillor Devlin,
Just-
and look
just
at that for you?
The Auchenback again is
Yeah.
omitted from the sites that could be used. It's probably the perfect example for a community which can be like you overcome that again of site in the community garden.
Yeah, I'll certainly look into that. If we've missed it, then
So
we
that
will.
piece of-
We will.
that
This,
piece of land,
yeah. So this is a draft report, so
Yeah.
we can then include that if we can. Okay, I'll keep you up to date.
Thanks, Councillor Devlin, for highlighting that. Councillor Pragdo, please.
I noticed on the list in Appendix 1 that there's more sites identified in the Leven Valley side of the authority rather than Eastwood. Can we revisit the Eastwood side? Because I know a lot of community councils, certainly in my ward, have been saying we want to be involved in wildflower planting and growing vegetables, particularly Clark, Netherley and Stamperland have a real interest in this. So, for example, I can't see the Busby Glen, excellent site, that probably should have been done years ago, Clarkson Health Centre, but maybe there's still quite a lot of space down at Netherley, the playing fields and stuff like that. Maybe a wee section of that could be taken, because I know the community council would really welcome, and that would maybe be a organisation to engage with. But yeah, I'm just slightly concerned that there seems to be not much of a balance. A large proportion does seem to be in the Leven Valley side, considering that, as the report states, the waiting list is actually the highest in the Eastwood side of the authority. So what can be done to kind of balance that out a bit?
Thanks, Councillor. One thing I would say is that across East Renfrewshire, there is demand for green space. So the green space can be used, as recreation. It can be sports, and obviously it can be for flooding protection, tree planting for climate change. So we're adding something else into that kind of mix. And I think it's fair to say that there's probably more land available in the Leven side than there actually is within Eastwood. However, this document is going to go out for public consultation, and we will hope to get to as many groups or interested people as possible. And if other organisations or groups come forward who are looking for it, then the strategy would permit us to look at that and hopefully do what we can do. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Leader. I just, in terms of trying to get, I'm not really familiar with allotments, but I know about them and I can see them and what have you. But in terms of size, what's a typical size of an allotment? And then a typical, say, hectare, for example, how many? Do you know what the stats are?
I don't think there is a kind of standard, because every bit of land can be differently shaped, so we would look at it in terms of each site. So if it's a small site, then probably have smaller sites, because usually you have to have some shed facility so that people can keep their equipment safe, and you would have accessible paths and paths into allotments. So it's not every piece of ground can be used for actually growing, so you have to put the infrastructure in as well. to deal with that. So I don't actually think I could answer that question, to be honest.
Well, it's helpful for us to give us an idea, because if we then see an area of land and it's a specific size, then we know maybe, oh, that'll be 10 or 20, or just, to give us an indication. I'm assuming, obviously, the soil's quite important, obviously, as well, for it to be suitable for growing.
Yeah, I had allotment for over 10 years, and our land was on former railway contaminated land because of the weed killing that's used on railway land. So basically you just start again, you dig it out and you put in, new soil or compost to help it over time. So it can be done on contaminated land.
Great, thanks. I'm also conscious that Eastwood is a challenging side, because I noticed that the waiting list is pretty much in Eastwood.
Yes.
Is that not necessarily been prioritised, but obviously you're aware of that? And
so there appears to be space for the Eastwood allotment to be expanded. So there is additional space there.
I thought it had occurred to me, but then I thought, well, where it is, maybe it wasn't.
No, there is scope for a bit of expansion. Yes, we have looked at that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Gillian, I'm very excited by this report. I think it's excellent, and there's a huge amount of thought that's gone into this. Really, really welcome it. It was part of our administration's manifesto commitments as well. So it's wonderful to see this coming through. I'd really encourage on the consultation that we publicise that as well as we can. So hopefully Graham's listening to that point, and that we can get that message out there, because you've identified a lot of the benefits of growing locally, and the well-being, skills development stuff. So there's a huge number of benefits here, and there is demand out there. But I think it would be helpful to help stimulate that demand, not just react to that demand. And I think your actions in the plan really highlight that as well. So I really welcome this. My colleagues have mentioned the issues with the Eastwood side, which again, it doesn't need to be allotment size. It can be, if I think about in Nielsen, it's really a small patch that they've taken over. It doesn't need to be huge amounts of land that we need to find.
And boxes can be really helpful as well, for growing. You can get a lot of stuff, you can get a lot of produce out of a decent sized box.
Yeah. So that's all really helpful. So really excited with this plan. Councillor Anderson, would you like to come back in?
Conscious that as well, water is a key thing about growth, and so do we, like for example, in the established areas of allotments, is there a water utility supply that's provided, or?
I think we would need to deal with it on a site-by-site case, to be honest with you, depending where it is. How close it would be to, for example, an existing water supply into a residential property or commercial property. So, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Devlin.
Question. I don't think we need to worry about water supply in the West Coast.
Can Cabinet recommend that we approve the draft food growing strategy for publication and consultation as set out in Appendix A, and notes that the number of people on the waiting list for allotments requires the Council to take reasonable steps to provide sufficient allotments? Are we agreed? Gillian, thank you. Really delighted to see this report. Thank you very much. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4, which is it's not item 4, it is item 5, which is No One Left Behind Employability Programmes 23-24. And I think Mike's going to take us through this.
Yeah, will do.
Thank you.
Okay, the purpose of this report is to inform members of the No One Left Behind award from the Scottish Government to East Hampshire Council and seek approval for programmes in 2023-24. The total award is expected to be £679,125, and this will aim to support over 320 people within East Renfrewshire into training, employment and volunteering. The No One Left Behind programme has been a key strand of employability activity within East Renfrewshire since 2020 and has delivered a wide range of successful programmes such as the Young Persons Guarantee and the Parental Employability Support Fund. The core purpose of No One Left Behind is to provide a person-centred approach to employability that is more flexible and responsive to changing labour markets, tackles inequalities and grows East Renfrewshire's economy. Most importantly, No One Left Behind supports those at risk of being left behind to move closer to and into fair and sustainable jobs. This programme will also complement the work that's been delivered via the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, supporting employee activity. So, Appendix 1 of the report outlines the achievements to date for those projects funded in 2022-23, and Appendix 2 of the report outlines those projects that we are seeking approval for in 2023-24. In terms of the breakdown, No One Left Behind, in terms of our generic employability service, has been awarded £259,000. Parental employability and child poverty will be £481,000, and linked to that is additional funding for child poverty is £198,000. So, mentioned previously, total is £679,000 and £125. The recommendations for Cabinet is that note the progress of those projects being funded in 2022-23 in Annex 1 and approve the projects outlined in Appendix 2 for 2023-24 and then delegate to the Director of Environment to make any adjustments to those proposals depending on detailed costs of projects becoming available and confirmed.
Thank you very much, Michael. Any questions on this? Any questions on this? Councillor Pragnell.
All these schemes for the upcoming year look fantastic and I'm fully supportive of them. But it's a question of Appendix 1 is actually quite confusing to get the detail, and it's how do we measure the outcomes, so, and how do we address, obviously one of the groups is care experienced children and young people, so how do we engage with them to say what has this impact had on our lives? I'm concerned about the outcomes. When do we see the outcomes, and are we recording that data of the outcomes? Because Appendix 1 seems a wee bit confusing, the way it's laid out. I don't know if other members felt that, but I certainly did.
Okay, in terms of Appendix 1, we'll take a wee look at that and come back with a clearer picture. In terms of recording information, we record information every single day on our information database. In terms of monthly reports, as well as feeding into the mid-year, end of year, plus also reporting to all of our external funders. We also report back to the Scottish Local Authority Economic Development Forum, as well as the Local Government Benchmark Framework as well. In terms of care experienced young people, that has been funded via the UK Shared Prosperity Fund as opposed to via the No One Left Behind programme.
Thanks very much, Michael. I actually probably agree with Councillor Pragnell. I'm not sure Appendix 1 is the clearest. My comment is more about the proposed spend and just looking at some of the detail behind that. If I'm right, and just being very simply taking the budget versus the number of people assisted. So if I take the first one, for example, but it's not just relating to that. Parents from all priority groups, £200,000, 100 people. So that looks like a cost of £2,000 effectively per individual parent. If you look further on, some of the costs of these interventions are very expensive. Some as high as £10,000, some as £14,000. Can you explain that rationale? And I suppose the underlying question is, can that be more effective, and can our outcomes be better for the money that we've got? Is really the crux of the question.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the proposed outcomes, until we actually then start delivering, then they may go up or they may go down. Now, obviously, the expectation is that they actually go up, and then that cost per person then comes down. So I think it's a question of, in terms of delivery, to see how people are being self-referred, to the services or referred from other services as well. And also, part of our engagement strategy is, making sure that we're in contact with as many residents within East Rent who know about the employability services and then can benefit from those services. So we can happily, in terms of reporting back, in terms of delivery, we can also then come back in terms of, those outcomes being delivered against the budget set for each of the programmes.
Thanks, Michael. I think that would be very important to see that. Just before I let Katrina come in, are these sort of targets based on our historical experience in terms of setting these sort of parameters for the new budget?
Yeah, so largely set from last year and what our sort of level of engagements were, and obviously with us coming out of lockdown, we then obviously expected to see a slight increase in terms of people coming to our door, and indeed via our other employability partners as well.
Katrina.
Yes, just to come back on the point of cost per outcome, the focus of our services are very often those who are furthest from the labour market and therefore will require more support and intervention. So, we could, choose people who we could support much more quickly into work, and that would cost us less, but purposely we target those people who are long-term employed, who are care experienced, who will require additional support, and those costs can be higher, and that's recognised very much by Scottish Government. That is the whole premise of No One Left Behind, that it is an inclusive approach, and therefore the costs are higher. But I think we could look at that just to do a comparative with other areas, just to do a check on our cost per outcome. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Thanks, Katrina. That's very helpful, and I completely accept the point that this is about harder to access people, and it will be more costly. I suppose in terms of measuring the outcomes, it's not just that first placement or job, it's sustainability is probably a key issue, and I don't know if it's possible. Probably not. What's the plus 1 year issue? Are they still in employment now? That so that we've got a sustainable benefit. But I'll leave that for you guys to think of, and how best to sort of report on that. Just a final point, and I think the answer is yes. But just to confirm, this would feed into the child poverty strategy group as well. It would be one of the streams of work within that. Perfect. Okay, thanks. That's Michael. Councillor Devlin.
And Michael, the clientele, obviously, what parts of the authority are they coming from?
So in terms of the services that we provide via Work East Wren, we provide an all East Wren service for those who are looking for employment now. What becomes any surprise in terms of the majority of referrals we get, either from DWP, self-referrals, etc., or from partners, are from over from the Barhead side of the authority. So quite happy to provide information in terms of last year, in terms of which sort of wards people are then engaging with our services from.
That's great.
Councillor Anderson.
Obviously, a key part of it is the local employability partnership, the LEP. That's the method to actually deploy the funds, and we the lead partner in that, and all the different partnerships feed into it in terms of identifying the best place, and it's absolutely incredibly important. So, in terms of how that works, can you give me an idea of like the key people, council officers, etc., and how often, and does it regularly meet?
Okay, so in terms of the local employability partnership, there are two groups. So one is the strategic group and one is the operational group. So the strategic group really sort of sets a strategy in terms of the sort of direction of employability activity, looking at sort of data as well in terms of where the sort of gaps are in terms of service provision. There's a wide range of council employees who actually attend that. I actually chair the LEP group, and we've got reps from the Work East Wren group, we've got reps from Julie's team as well, Julie Bresner colleagues, we've got education on board, we have HSCP, we have the business community in terms of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Business Gateway. We have reps from the colleges as well as the voluntary sector. So that's the strategic group. In terms of the next group is the operational group. That's the ones who I think who do all the hard work and delivery on the ground, and that's again is mirrored. There's a wide section of partners from that. So both in terms of the council, HSCP, third sector, also got the business community as well, and we then sort of take recognition of any operational issues that are happening on the ground, which may be a challenge either for the people who are benefiting from the service, or indeed from those organisations who are actually then delivering the service. And if we can then cascade that up to the group, we can then hopefully rectify those issues.
Excellent.
In terms of frequency, both groups meet every quarter.
Thanks for
that. Thanks, Michael. And I think at the outset I should have said, we welcome this funding and we welcome the impact that this can have on the harder to reach groups within our community. So really welcome that extra funding. So if we can go to the recommendations, recommended that Cabinet 1 note the progress of projects funded in 22-23, B, approve the projects outlined in Appendix 2 for 23-24, C, delegate to the Director of Environment to make adjustments to the proposals depending upon the detailed cost of projects becoming available, and D, note that further progress reports will be submitted to Cabinet in due course seeking approval for projects in future years. Are we all content with that? Agreed. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of this part of the session.
Sorry.
Do I need to say...
It's just to exclude the press and public so that it's on the recording. Yeah.
So, I know, I'm just going to get it. You got it there.
So you've got has to exclude, if everybody agrees to exclude the press and public by virtue of...
So what is there specific wording I need to say?
So just ask if you can...
It was in the main one, wasn't it? It's gone.
It's not in the
it was
report,
in the agenda.
it's not in the agenda.
Yeah, it was in the second page of the... No, it's not. It's gone. So what do I need to say for this one? So if we can exclude...
if everybody agrees.
If everyone agrees, can we exclude press and TV coverage for this confidential matter?
It's...
Yeah. Why don't you do it?
Yeah, if we can, the Leader would like to ask if Cabinet approves for the exclusion of the public, all members of the public for this item, by virtue of paragraph 6 and 14 of part 1 of the schedule of 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 as amended. Can I confirm everybody is happy with that to exclude the public? Thank you very much. Public have all now been excluded and we can carry on with the meeting.
Perfect. And this is not recorded, is that